she's like, wait a second, I want to help save that planet.
And the amazing thing is that you're a pilot. You fly helicopters like someone drives a car. I mean, you've incorporated your love of flying into the book, but you're celebrating by donating to 2 organizations that you are very passionate about. Can you tell us about that?
I'm super excited about the 2 organizations that I get to support with this book. One is Code for Classy. You know Carly Kloss. It's her. It really encourages women to get into STEM.
Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sanchez stepped into the spotlight with what seemed like the perfect fairy tale. A love story wrapped in billions of dollars and photographed against Hawaiian sunsets. The world saw them on the beaches of Maui exchanging vows. Under the glow of fairy lights, while Hollywood icons, tech giants, and political heavyweights looked on, it was not just a wedding, it was a declaration of power. Lauren glided down the aisle in a couture gown worth more than a mansion, while Jeff stood like a man who had conquered both business and love. The guest list sparkled with names from Leonardo DiCaprio to Oprah Winfrey to Elon Musk, every detail crafted to scream influence and control. And for a moment, the image worked headlines. Called it the union of the decade, social media was flooded with admiration and envy, and Lauren basked in the glow of her new crown as queen of the Bezos empire. She laughed beneath Mediterranean skies aboard a $500 million yacht, posed in outfits worth more than entire neighborhoods, and lived a life of non-stop extravagance, from Chanel fittings to Paris shopping sprees to charity galas where her presence alone drew camera flashes. But behind the perfection there were already murmurs, whispers so soft that only insiders noticed Bezos. Ever the strategist had begun calculating what this lifestyle meant for his reputation. He had built his empire on discipline, precision, and image control. Yet now headlines were shifting, focusing less on his ventures and more on Lauren's endless appetite for luxury. And though the public saw champagne glasses clinking on yachts, Bezos was quietly pulling strings, resetting accounts, declining invitations, and trimming the edges of a life that was beginning to spiral too far into excess. Lauren, on the other hand, had no intention of stepping back. She had spent her life chasing the center of attention, from Hollywood newsrooms to red carpets to private jet runways, and she was not about to fade now. Her calendar filled with fittings, spa afternoons, and midnight after parties. She thrived on the energy of being everywhere, seen by everyone, admired by many. But for Bezos, this meant risk to his image, his empire, and his carefully built narrative of control. And those close to him began to notice the tension as small cracks appeared, hidden from cameras, but obvious in private. The Maui wedding, that was supposed to mark the beginning of their perfect forever, may have been the opening act to something much darker, a story where love, ego, and billions collide, and where the cost of control could be far higher than any designer gown or luxury yacht. In the weeks after the Maui wedding, the glow of the ceremony still lingered on Instagram feeds and glossy magazine spreads. But inside the walls of Jeff Bezos's Beverly Hills estate, the mood was shifting. Insiders whispered that the carefully staged photographs of the couple laughing aboard yachts and walking hand in hand through cobblestone European streets hid a reality far less idyllic. Lauren Sanchez had always been known for her appetite for the extravagant. She thrived in circles where exclusivity meant everything and being seen meant survival. Rodeo Drive knew her by name. Chanel and Balmain fitted her with gowns before they ever reached runways. Luxury was not indulgence for her, it was identity. And when she married Jeff, the richest man in the world, it was as if the gates to a limitless kingdom had opened. But what she did not anticipate was that Bezos, even with all his wealth, was not a man to indulge endlessly without strategy. He had built Amazon on discipline and obsession with efficiency. He had become the wealthiest man alive, not by reckless spending, but by ruthless calculation. And insiders claim that calculation had followed him into his marriage. At first, it was subtle. Lauren would notice that a purchase request lingered longer before approval, that a credit line she once had free access to had been quietly capped. Staff noticed that her calendar invitations began to be redirected or politely declined, where once she would have been whisked across the globe for an art gala. Suddenly, Bezos would insist that they stay in Los Angeles to keep a lower profile. These shifts did not go unnoticed by Lauren, who interpreted them as more than simple adjustments for her. They were warning signs that her freedom, the very oxygen she breathed, was being constrained. What once felt like a marriage of equals began to feel like a merger where she was the junior partner. The conflict came to a head on a night that sources close to the couple Now describe as a turning point, the evening began like any other glamorous outing. Jeff and Lauren arrived at a Malibu restaurant with a circle of powerful friends from Hollywood moguls to Silicon Valley financiers. Cameras caught them smiling outside, but those who shared the table recall an unusual tension. Lauren was quieter than usual. Her laughter forced her energy dimmed when the evening ended and they returned to the Beverly Hills mansion. The smiles vanished. What followed was described. As a clash of wills, Lauren in her shimmering gown stood beneath a chandelier demanding answers about why her lifestyle was suddenly being curtailed, why transactions had bounced embarrassingly in public, why her autonomy was being clipped. Bezos remained calm but firm, speaking in the same measured tone he had used in boardrooms across decades. He insisted it was about boundaries, about optics, about ensuring that their marriage was not swallowed whole by tabloids that framed Lauren as nothing more than a billion-dollar bride with a billion-dollar appetite. He reminded her that image mattered, that perception was currency, and that they were not immune to scrutiny. Lauren, however, saw it differently. She accused him of undermining her, of trying to control her in ways that humiliated her in front of her world. The argument escalated, voices rising until staff were dismissed from the room. Witnesses later revealed that Bezos handed her an envelope. Inside was a formal financial adjustment, a document that outlined new limitations on her personal expenditures for Bezos. It was a rational move, a way to codify boundaries and regain control of the narrative. But for Lauren, it was a line drawn in permanent ink. She reportedly looked at him and said no one, not even Jeff Bezos, would dictate her choices from that moment. Insiders say the marriage shifted permanently into a battleground. The envelope became a symbol whispered about in social circles from Beverly Hills to Manhattan. Lauren saw it as proof that she was being diminished, reduced from a partner to a subordinate. Her friends rallied around her, arguing that she had built a career of her own long before Bezos, that she had always thrived independently as a media's personality and helicopter pilot, and that the restriction was nothing less than an insult to her identity. Meanwhile, Bezos's allies defended him, saying the decision was about responsibility, not control, that a man with a fortune measured in hundreds of billions could not afford to appear reckless or indulgent, that the headlines portraying Lauren as an extravagant spender undermined everything he had cultivated for decades. The debate quickly spread far beyond their household in elite circles. Dinner parties buzzed with speculation. Was this simply a husband protecting his image? Or was it an act of dominance disguised as caution? Was this about numbers? Or was it about power? The whispers deepened when friends began revisiting Lauren's past, her long-term relationship with NFL star Tony Gonzalez, her marriage to Hollywood agent Patrick Whitesell, and her reputation for being drawn to high-profile men in positions of influence. Critics argued that these relationships painted a pattern of ambition cloaked in romance, that Bezos had ignored warning signs when he rushed into marriage after his divorce from Mackenzie Scott. Others defended Lauren, saying she was ambitious, yes, but also accomplished, charismatic, and fiercely independent. The kind of woman who thrived in the spotlight because she had always created it for herself. But regardless of perspective, the damage had been done. Staff reported that the mansion felt electrified with tension. Bezos retreated to his private study, filled with rare books and personal relics, while Lauren locked herself in a guest suite. Their smiles for paparazzi continued, but insiders whispered that behind closed doors, silence reigned. The fight became more than a private disagreement. Became a spectacle whispered about in elite circles dubbed the allowance cut. It forced questions about autonomy, reputation, and power into the open, and it signaled that their marriage, already fragile under the weight of wealth and scrutiny, might face cracks deeper than either imagined. As the days passed, the whispers only grew. Lauren was seen in public with her trademark confidence, posing in designer outfits, attending charity events, but insiders claimed her inner circle heard a different tone: frustration, humiliation, even fury. She reportedly confided that she felt caged, that she could not breathe under the new rules, that what she had imagined as a partnership had turned into a negotiation for control. Bezos, on the other hand, pressed forward with his business face intact, smiling at events, speaking about innovation and the future of space travel. But those close to him said he had grown colder, more calculating in private, unwilling to bend once the boundary had been set for Bezos. The decision was not reversible. It was about principle, about narrative. Once an adjustment was made, it would stay in place, because to retreat would be to admit weakness. The contrast between their public smiles and private strain only deepened. Speculation, could this be the first crack that would unravel everything? Would Bezos sacrifice peace for control? Would Lauren sacrifice autonomy for status? History has shown that marriages built under the blaze of wealth and fame rarely keep their fissures hidden for long, and insiders now watch closely, wondering if this billionaire soap opera will end in reconciliation or in spectacle divorce. The war has only just begun, and its cost will be counted not only in dollars, but in reputations, in power, and in the fragile balance between love and control. In the aftermath of the envelope incident, Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sánchez began living in two parallel realities, one for the cameras and one for the quiet corridors of their Beverly Hills mansion. The world still saw them smiling on red carpets, waving from yachts, and posing for magazine covers. But those who worked closest to them whispered that the energy inside their home had shifted irreversibly. Lauren had always thrived on motion, her days moving like a carousel of fittings lunches, spa treatments parties, and late-night after-parties. She belonged to the world of glittering social calendars, where every event was another opportunity to be seen, photographed, admired. And she embraced that attention because for her visibility was currency. But after the restrictions, she began noticing subtle humiliations. Credit lines that once never faltered, suddenly denied at boutiques, staff quietly adjusting her travel itineraries at the last moment, invitations from Manhattan's elite, circles being withdrawn under the explanation that Jeff had declined the appearances. It was a slow drip of control, and Lauren felt every drop. Insiders claimed she became restless, venting to friends that she was being suffocated, that she was no longer the same independent woman who once piloted helicopters over Los Angeles chasing stories from the sky. Now she was living under watch inside a palace of glass. She confided that even though she wore couture gowns and stepped off private jets, she felt as though every decision had to pass through invisible gates, guarded by Jeff's silent rules. And for a woman whose entire life had been marked by a relentless push for autonomy, the change was unbearable. Meanwhile, Bezos carried on with an icy calm. His confidants said he viewed the restrictions as strategy, not cruelty. He argued to those around him that his empire could not afford another public relations implosion. The tabloids had already fed for months on their scandalous, beginning leaking texts, photos, and intimate messages from when his affair with Lauren shattered his marriage to Mackenzie Scott. He had survived that firestorm, but he would not survive a narrative that painted him as a reckless man letting his wife burn through billions in ostentation. Bezos believed perception was everything, and he would not let perception frame Lauren as a liability. Still, the whispers grew louder. From Malibu villas to Wall Street boardrooms, people gossiped about the allowance cut, some saying Bezos was justified, others saying it revealed a troubling imbalance in the marriage. Was it protection or domination? Was Lauren the glamorous partner or the controlled companion? The debate itself became the scandal staff inside the Beverly Hills mansion described the nights as cold. Jeff often retreating to his library, Lauren hosting friends late into the night as if to reclaim control of her time, her space, her image. Sometimes the house felt like two kingdoms, coexisting uneasily under the same roof. The tension spilled into public in subtle ways. Eagle-eyed watchers noticed Lauren's body language stiffening beside Jeff at certain events, her gaze straying from cameras, her laughter forced, while Bezos's expression carried the calculated stillness of a man managing optics rather than intimacy. Their appearances became theater-scripted smiles, choreographed hand-holding. But those in the know claimed the distance was impossible to ignore Lauren's. Friends rallied to her side, urging her not to let herself be diminished, reminding her of the career she had built long before. Bezos, of the men of power she had known and left on her own terms. They painted Jeff's move as control pure and simple, and they warned her that once power was taken back, it was rarely returned. Bezos's circle, however, was just as firm, telling him that his boundaries were essential, that giving Lauren unrestricted access would only fuel the narrative that she was using him for the spotlight, that he had to protect not just his fortune, but the very image of discipline and restraint he had spent a lifetime creating. The divide was not just between Jeff and Lauren, it was between their worlds, between their circles, between two competing interpretations of what their marriage meant. As the whispers spread, old stories about Lauren resurfaced. Her high-profile romances, her love of luxury, her reputation for being drawn to powerful men, critics resurfaced. Her past like evidence in a trial. and they used it to argue that Bezos had ignored red flags, that he had rushed into marriage blinded by infatuation. Defenders countered, saying Lauren was more than ambition, that she was charismatic, magnetic, fiercely independent, a woman who had created her own place in elite society long before Bezos entered the picture. But in the war of whispers, nuance rarely survived, perception became reality. And perception now framed Lauren as a woman at odds with her husband over money and control. The symbolism was too sharp to ignore the richest man in the world, handing his wife an envelope telling her there were limits. The story practically wrote itself, and the tabloids devoured it. The mansion itself became a character in the unfolding drama. Staff described it as charged, as if the walls themselves absorbed the tension. Jeff stalking the hallways in silence, Lauren's laughter echoing with defiance when her friends visited the couple, still posed for photos abroad, still smiled at charity galas. But insiders swore those smiles masked something brittle, fragile, even dangerous for marriages built on such extremes. Rarely heal quietly. Every public photo became a study for body language analysts. Every rumor became magnified until it was no longer clear what was real and what was gossip. What was certain was that the balance of power had shifted in their marriage. Lauren had always seen herself as an equal, if not more, her identity built on glamour, visibility, independence. But with that single envelope, Bezos had drawn a line, and behind that line, he held the power. The war was no longer about money, it was about identity control, ego, and the future of a union born in fire. And now, tested in silence, and insiders whispered that the silence itself might be the loudest warning of all. By the time weeks had passed since the first explosive fight, Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sánchez had settled into a dangerous rhythm of appearances for the public and quiet distance behind closed doors. Those who watched them closely understood that what looked like harmony on camera was more like performance, a carefully scripted play to preserve the image of a billionaire love story. But behind the golden gates of their Beverly Hills estate, whispers of conflict grew louder. Staff confided that Lauren had begun making her displeasure known in subtle ways, choosing outfits and events that sent quiet signals of defiance, staging photos with friends without Jeff to remind the world she was still independent, while Jeff doubled down on a quieter life, one that protected his narrative of discipline, control, and vision. The man who had built Amazon into a global empire was not about to let his personal life unravel into tabloid spectacle. Yet the irony was that the more he tried to manage optics, the more those optics betrayed him. Because gossip magazines and insider blogs began publishing stories not of a happy couple, but of a war for control, with Lauren cast as the extravagant wife clipped of her wings and Jeff as the billionaire husband determined to dictate her life. Those in their social circle debated endlessly over dinner tables in Malibu and Manhattan. Some argued Jeff was right to impose boundaries. After all, endless headlines about Lauren's shopping sprees and yacht trips risked overshadowing his legacy in space exploration and innovation. But others whispered that by treating Lauren like an employee instead of a partner, he had planted a seed of resentment that would grow and spread until the marriage itself was consumed. What no one could deny was that the envelope had become a symbol, one that insiders referenced as the beginning of the unraveling. Lauren's friends compared it to a contract handed down from the throne, a declaration that her freedom was now subject to review, while Jeff's allies defended it as simply good governance. But inside the mansion, the fights did not stop. Lauren had grown more vocal, more confrontational. She no longer asked in whispers why her credit lines were altered. She demanded answers. She accused him of humiliating her, of making her appear weak in the circles that mattered most, where image was everything and reputation was survival. And Jeff remained stone-faced, calm but unyielding, repeating that boundaries were essential, that excess threatened both of them, that this was about protecting their union, not destroying it. But Lauren did not believe him. She believed it was about control. Insiders say the tension came to a boiling point. One night after a gala where Lauren had been denied a purchase approval for a couture gown she had promised to wear, her anger erupted the moment they returned home. She accused him of deliberately embarrassing her, of making her look small in front of designers who once courted her endlessly. Jeff responded in his same measured voice. But this time, even his calm cracked as he told her she was risking everything, that he had given her the world, and she was treating it like a toy that could never break. The shouting carried through the marble halls, staff once again dismissed from earshot. Yet they heard enough to know the argument had grown louder than before. And when it ended, Lauren retreated to her own suite while Jeff shut himself into his study, where the glow of computer screens and the silence of rare books replaced the chaos beyond their marriage was no longer a private bond. It was a stage where every move was dissected by friends, foes, tabloids, and analysts alike. The question whispered everywhere was whether the richest man in the world had entered a marriage he could not control, or whether Lauren Sánchez, the woman who had always thrived in attention, would accept being reshaped by the iron discipline of Jeff. Bezos, the debates grew sharper as her past was dragged back into the light. Her relationships with Tony Gonzalez, Patrick Whitesell, her reputation as a woman drawn to power. Some saw it as proof that Bezos had ignored obvious warnings, others saw it as irrelevant, painting her instead as an ambitious independent figure, unfairly cast as a gold digger. But as the noise grew, the couple's smiles for the public looked thinner. Their eyes betrayed distance, their bodies stiff with formality. In photos meant to prove intimacy, tabloids began asking the question openly: is this the first crack in the billionaire fairy tale? Is the Bezos Sanchez marriage already unraveling? Whispers turned into speculation, speculation turned into headlines, and headlines turned into narrative, until even those who had once believed in their fairy tale began to doubt whether it could survive. Insiders described the Beverly Hills estate now as a house divided, Jeff's routines carved around business, meetings, and private solitude. Lauren's carved around public outings and friendships, the air between them charged with unspoken tension, neither willing to yield, both determined to win, because this was no longer just about love. It was about power, about identity, about who controlled the story. And in a world where image was currency and perception was everything, neither could afford to lose. And so the stage is set for a war that will not be measured in dollars alone, but in the destruction of reputations. And the question now whispered everywhere, from Hollywood parties to Wall Street offices, is whether Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sánchez can hold their marriage together, or whether this will become the most spectacular implosion the billionaire world has ever seen. The months after the wedding painted a story that to the public looked like a non-stop honeymoon, but beneath the glossy surface, the reality was anything but simple. Bezos found himself in an endless balancing act, trying to maintain his empire while keeping pace with Lauren's hunger for attention. It was no longer about just showing up to charity galas or yacht gatherings. It was about curating an image, one that fed Lauren's need for spotlight while not diminishing his calculated brand as the disciplined visionary who built Amazon from scratch. Yet every step into Lauren's world chipped away at that image. The woman who once flew helicopters over Los Angeles now flew into boardrooms, private islands, and couture ateliers with the same energy. But this time her flight path cut into Bezos' reputation. Insiders whispered that Lauren's team pushed photographers to capture her angles, demanded stylists beyond reason, and insisted that every appearance elevate her into a category of celebrity. She had long dreamed of becoming Bezos, tolerated it at first. After all, love came with compromise. But his patience thinned when journalists began writing less about his companies and more about the dresses Lauren wore, the yachts they sailed on, the private jets they boarded. The problem was not extravagance alone. It was perception. Perception that the richest man in the world had become less of a titan and more of a sponsor in a never-ending reality show. And perception is the currency. Bezos valued above all Lauren's transformation into a modern-day social empress was deliberate. Her social media presence carefully curated, her appearances calculated for maximum exposure. Her circle expanded not with lifelong friends, but with those who could elevate her brand. She maneuvered into spaces where billionaires, celebrities, and royalty mingled, always positioning herself as more than a guest but as a centerpiece. Yet behind the glamorous photos and lavish parties, insiders began describing a woman who felt the weight of proving herself. Every move had to be bigger, every outfit louder, every yacht more extravagant, because the moment she stepped back, the illusion could shatter. The critics would say she was just a television host who married a billionaire, and for Lauren, that narrative was unacceptable. Bezos, on the other hand, began orchestrating quiet damage control behind the curtain, meetings with PR teams, brainstorming sessions on shifting public narratives, careful leaks, to redirect headlines towards space exploration, philanthropy, and technology innovation. But the public eye is fickle. Once an image takes hold, it spreads. And for Bezos, the image of being overshadowed by Lauren's indulgence was becoming harder to erase. Business partners noticed it, board members whispered about it, Rivals in Silicon Valley exploited it. Every photo shoot on Lauren's Instagram became another data point in the argument that Bezos was no longer the disciplined empire builder. But a man adrift in Lauren's endless search for relevance, the tension grew in private arguments, muted but sharp schedules that no longer aligned. Lauren insisted on more time in fashion capitals. Bezos insisted on meetings with scientists, politicians, and defense contractors. Lauren wanted to dance until dawn in Cannes. Bezos wanted to be in bed by midnight, preparing for an early call with Blue Origin engineers. Two worlds colliding, not in love, but in expectation, the cracks that began in whispers widened into chasms, and the wedding that was meant to seal there forever started to look like the prologue to an inevitable reckoning. Friends who had been close to them described a shift. Bezos grew quieter, more strategic, less indulgent. His conversations focused on legacy, on projects that would outlast him, while Lauren doubled down on the present, chasing every red carpet, every exclusive gala, every designer who would dress her. It was as if they were living two parallel lives, intersecting only for the cameras. Bezos calculating the future, Lauren consuming the present, and still the public watched, torn between fascination and skepticism. Some admired Lauren for her boldness, her refusal to shrink beside the richest man alive. Others criticized her for what they saw as insatiable vanity. Tabloids began publishing side-by-side photos, comparing her past to her present, pointing out her transformation, not just in style but in demeanor. Once a supporting figure, now commanding the spotlight, as if the world revolved around her. Bezos, meanwhile, became the supporting character in his own story. His legacy reduced in headlines to Lauren's choices, her dresses, her jewels, her presence. What few understood was the cost behind the glamour, the cost of maintaining that image. Lauren faced relentless pressure from critics and admirers alike. The whispers about surgery, about transformation, about reinvention. Every camera flash reminded her that one wrong angle could unravel the illusion. And Bezos too paid a cost. Not financial, for money was infinite, but reputational. The brand he had built for decades was bending under the weight of Lauren's empire of appearances. The final irony was clear. What began as love wrapped in billions became a contest between control and indulgence. Bezos craving discipline, legacy, and precision. Lauren craving visibility, relevance, and recognition. Their marriage symbolized not just romance, but the collision of two different definitions of power. One measured in rockets, boardrooms, and history books. The other measured in gowns, paparazzi flashes, and social dominance. In the end, the world continues to watch, because stories like these are never just about two people. They are mirrors of society. Bezos and Lauren represent ambition, excess, reinvention, and the fragile balance between love and power. Their Maui wedding may have been the most photographed event of the decade, but it also marked the beginning of a narrative still unfolding, a narrative where the richest man alive battles not competitors, but perception, and where the woman who captured his heart battles the ghosts of irrelevance, determined to prove to the world that she belongs at the very center of it all.
This video covers legal allegations in a news context. All claims are from official filings and no guilt is implied until proven in court. Please keep all discussions respectful. Allegations are not facts until proven in court.